Hey there, Drowsy Historian here. Tonight we're crawling into the kind of hole no one comes out of clean. Not in body, not in mind. You're not Rambo, you're not even lucky. You're the shortest guy in the unit, which means congratulations. You've just been handed a flashlight, a rusting .45, and a one-way ticket into the belly of the earth. You smell like mildew and metal. Your lungs are full of jungle rot. And somewhere down in that suffocating black maze beneath Vietnam, there's a tripwire with your name on it. No one's filming this. No medals, no music, just mud, insects, and the quiet certainty that this tunnel hates you back. So before your flashlight flickers out and something venomous brushes past your leg, go ahead and leave a comment telling me where you're listening from and what ungodly hour it is. I always like to know who's still awake while we slowly descend into historical hell. And if you want early access to more of these calm, creeping nightmares, there's a link to the Patreon in the description. Now exhale, steady your nerves, and try not to think about what's moving in the dark ahead of you. Let's begin. You've only been in Vietnam for 3 days and already you smell like mildew, fear, and meat left out too long. Your boots are wet, your socks are wetter, and your skin is starting to go soft in all the wrong places. No one tells you this part, how fast the jungle gets inside you. Not metaphorically, literally. The mold, the mud, the sweat. It soaks through fabric, seeps into your pack, clings to your scalp. You scrub your armpits with gritty soap and still somehow come out dirtier than when you started. Every surface here feels alive and slightly hostile, including your own uniform. The air presses against your face like a wet towel, dense with heat and whatever those bugs are doing, just out of sight. The jungle is loud, not city loud, not even battlefield loud, just alive. Birds that sound like alarms, insects that scream, leaves that crackle like static even when there's no breeze. Something rustles in the undergrowth every few minutes, but you stop turning to look. It's never something you want to see. A lizard. A rat. Once a hand, probably attached to a body. You didn't stick around long enough to confirm. You don't sleep, not really. You lie down, and you close your eyes and try not to dream about the noise outside the tent. Or inside the tent. The rats are real, and they don't care about rank. One of them chewed through the toe of your bunkmate's boot last night, while his foot was still in it. He didn't scream. He just sat up, wide-eyed, and whispered something about karma. No one asked for clarification. There are no front lines here. You thought there would be. You thought war had sides. But Vietnam is a smear of mud, of ideology, of geography. You walk patrols past rice paddies that look peaceful until someone steps on a mine. You drink water that tastes like rust and iodine. You fill sandbags with your own sweat and pretend that a wall of dirt will save you from the next mortar round. You were issued a rifle and told that the enemy could be anywhere and that they often aren't wearing uniforms. That was the whole briefing. Everything else you're supposed to figure out on your own. There's a general rhythm to things, but it's the rhythm of long stretches of boredom punctuated by sudden wet chaos. You'll sit for hours in the heat, swatting flies off your neck, counting mosquito bites, waiting for the next thing to go wrong. And when it does, it's instant. A snapped twig, a click, a scream. Gunfire sounds different here. It echoes weirdly, bouncing off trees and brush until you can't tell what direction it's coming from. The first time it happens, you hit the dirt so fast you knock the wind out of yourself. No one laughs. They've all done the same. Food is a lottery. Some days you get powdered eggs and beef that tastes like old paper. Other days it's just crackers and whatever you can scavenge. One guy found a can of peaches last week. You'd have thought he struck oil. He offered a single slice to each of you and passed the tin around like a sacrament. You swore you'd remember that taste forever. You already don't. Letters from home come sporadically. When they do arrive, they're sun-bleached, sweat-stained, and 2 weeks too late. Your mother writes about the garden. Your sister writes about a boy. Someone signs a card from your dog. which somehow makes you want to cry more than anything else. You fold them carefully and tuck them into the one pocket that doesn't leak. You don't read them again, but you know they're there. A fragile reminder that a version of you still exists somewhere else, clean, safe, not yet erased by humidity and fear. The officers don't tell you much. They're busy reading maps that don't match the terrain and radioing for helicopters that won't come until tomorrow. You march, you dig, you sweat, you try not to step where the guy before you stepped. You don't ask questions. Questions get you noticed, and being noticed gets you volunteered. That's the rule. Head down, mouth shut, rifle up. You're not special here, no one is. You're one more uniform in a war that's already chewing through bodies faster than anyone can count. You haven't been shot at yet, not directly anyway. You haven't seen a friend die. You haven't found out what kind of soldier you are. But you've got the creeping feeling that all of that is coming soon. Maybe tomorrow. Maybe 5 minutes from now. The jungle doesn't make appointments, it just waits. And as you swat a fly off your cheek and try not to gag on the smell of diesel and rotting vegetation, you overhear a name, a job title almost. Just 2 words, tunnel rat. You don't know what it means yet. Not really, but something in the way the sergeant says it makes your stomach turn. And when his eyes land on you, the smallest guy in the platoon, you understand, somewhere deep in your gut, that the worst part of this war hasn't started yet. It happens fast. You're sitting on an ammo crate, picking mud out from under your fingernails, when someone calls your name. You don't look up right away. Maybe they'll move on. Pick someone else. But the voice comes again, firmer, closer, and then a shadow blocks the sun. It's the sergeant, and he's not here to chat. He jerks his thumb toward a small dirt mound at the edge of the tree line, freshly disturbed. A hole gapes near the base, barely wider than your shoulders. He says flatly, "You're up." You glance around like there's been some mistake. You're not up. You don't even know what up is, but no one else is moving. The others, the guys you dig trenches with, eat rations next to, swap dumb jokes with when the shelling dies down, suddenly seem very interested in their boots. You stand slowly, heart already knocking against your ribs, and shuffle toward the hole. The sergeant tells you what little he knows. VC tunnel entrance. Could be short, could go for miles, might be abandoned, might not, could have traps, probably does. Your job is to clear and assess. Those are the exact words, as if this is a routine inspection and not a crawling descent into potential death. You nod because that's what's expected, and he hands you your gear like he's giving out a lunch tray. 1.45 pistol, 1 flashlight with a red lens, 1 length of rope, not for safety, but so someone can drag your body back if things go wrong. There's no briefing, no manual, no tips from the last guy, because the last guy hasn't made it back. You squat beside the hole and peer in. It breathes warm air into your face, thick with the smell of old dirt, sweat, and something sour that sets off quiet alarms in your brain. The entrance is low and narrow, just tall enough for you to crouch walk for a few feet before it vanishes into blackness. You take a breath, drop to your belly, and begin to crawl. Inside, the temperature climbs fast. It's somehow hotter down here than it was in the sun, and the air moves like soup. The walls close in, rough and damp, pressing against your shoulders as you worm forward, one slow foot at a time. Your flashlight casts a dull red glow ahead, illuminating the packed dirt, the occasional root, and not much else. You can't see more than a few feet in front of you. You can't turn around. You can't even sit up. Every inch forward is a gamble. You've been told what might be waiting for you. Pungy stick traps, tripwires, pressure plates, grenades mounted in the ceiling. But knowing and seeing are different things. You freeze at every creak, every flicker of shadow. Your breath comes too fast, bouncing off the walls and making it sound like something is following you. A rat scurries past your face, close enough to brush your cheek with its greasy fur. You don't scream, you just stop moving until the shaking in your hands slows enough to keep going. You don't know how far in you are when you realise the silence is worse than the noise. You were expecting whispers, footsteps, maybe even gunfire, but there's nothing. Just the sound of your own heartbeat and the occasional drip of water from somewhere overhead. The tunnel turns and dips and narrows again. You press your chest to the ground and inch forward, feeling your belt scrape against stone. Your shoulders jam briefly, and for a moment you think this might be it, that this is where you get stuck, alone, underground, with no one to pull you out. And then it opens up slightly, a small chamber, just tall enough to kneel in. There are signs of recent use, burned out candles, a few spent shell casings, a torn piece of cloth. You don't see anyone, but that doesn't mean you're alone. You stay perfectly still, pistol raised, trying not to breathe too loudly. Minutes pass, or maybe hours. Time bends in places like this. Eventually, you back out, slowly, carefully, one awful inch at a time, until daylight flickers at the edge of your vision and a hand reaches in to grab your wrist. When you climb out, blinking and soaked in your own sweat, no one cheers. The sergeant gives you a nod. One guy claps you on the back. Someone hands you a canteen. You sit in the dirt and take a sip of warm, metallic water while your hands tremble like tuning forks. The others don't ask what you saw. You don't offer. This wasn't a story. It was an initiation. From now on, this is your job. You're the tunnel rat. You go in first. You go in alone. You crawl through darkness with a gun that might misfire and a flashlight that might flicker out at the worst possible moment. You check for traps by stepping on them, and if you're lucky, they don't go off. You listen for breathing in the silence and hope it's not yours echoed back at you. You don't have a specialty code. There's no fancy patch for this. Just a quiet understanding that every time someone points to a fresh hole in the earth, you're the one expected to go see what's inside. Not because you're fearless, not because you're trained, just because you fit. By the time you've done a few missions, you stop thinking of the tunnel as an isolated hazard. It's not a trap, it's a system, a network, an entire world underneath your boots, humming quietly, waiting. And if you want to survive it, you'd better understand how it works. Because this isn't just a hiding place. It's a machine built from dirt and patience, and you're crawling straight into its gears. The Cu Chi tunnel system isn't just some crude burrow dug by desperate men. It's a deliberately engineered nightmare. A subterranean fortress carved out of clay and death, built by hands that knew every inch of the jungle and every flaw in American assumptions. You thought you'd be crawling through a tight hallway and calling it a day. What you're actually entering is an entire network. Miles of interconnected tunnels, trapdoors, hidden chambers, and false walls. It's not a tunnel, it's a body, and you're crawling through its veins. The top layer is simple, just a few feet down, shallow enough to keep hidden under a patch of ferns or a dusting of leaves. That's where you find the decoys, short dead ends or simple storage alcoves filled with empty ammo boxes or useless supplies designed to stall or distract you. Sometimes they'll leave a pair of sandals or a fake map in there, just to make you think you found something important. It's bait. You're the rat. And the real tunnel entrance is still meters below your boots. A little deeper, and the structure changes. The walls get more compact, smoother too. Clay mostly. Not the soft kind you played with in school, but the iron-hard stuff that resists shovels and holds its shape even in monsoon season. It's not reinforced with steel or concrete, just years of careful engineering, pressed and packed and pressed again by generations of patient labour. These aren't slapdash hiding spots. They're permanent installations, multiple levels, in some places as deep as 30 feet underground. That's 3 stories of solid dirt between you and the sky. And it's not just one straight path either. It branches, it loops, it doubles back. Some tunnels are barely wide enough for your shoulders. Others open into rooms, actual rooms, just big enough for 2 or 3 people to sit, hunched over a map or a rice bowl. There are kitchens down there, weapon workshops, infirmaries, places where people lived and cooked and sewed uniforms by candlelight while the war raged just above their heads. Some even had wells, air vents, and chimneys that vented smoke through long, hidden paths to avoid detection. You didn't build this. You don't belong here. But now it's your job to figure out how to navigate it, without setting anything off. The air is different the deeper you go, heavier, staler, more aware of itself. The oxygen thins out as you descend, and sometimes you're crawling through air that hasn't been fresh since last week. The Viet Cong built clever vertical shafts with U-bends to trap gas and smoke in case of chemical attacks. And it works, sometimes too well. You'll find pockets where breathing feels like trying to inhale through a damp sock. And every time you think about standing up to catch your breath, you remember you can't. You're inside a tomb someone else designed to survive in, not you. Then there are the doors, if you can even call them that. Trapdoors carved from the same soil as the walls, pressed with clay and camouflaged so well you can stare right at one and never know it's there. The hinges are made from old tyres or bamboo or whatever else the builders had on hand, and they don't creak. You'll see a perfectly smooth wall, and then someone touches it the right way, and it opens like a mouth. Some of these doors lead to another chamber. Some lead to pits. Some don't open again once they close. They didn't build this for comfort. You can feel that. The floor isn't flat. It tilts and dips and squeezes at random intervals, forcing you to shift your weight, twist your hips, press your face into dirt. Some passages are booby-trapped, some flooded, some just end. You'll be crawling and suddenly the roof lowers until you're pinned, forced to wriggle backward like an earthworm with a sidearm. Every inch forward is a negotiation. But the most terrifying part, it's still in use. Some of the chambers are warm. There are footprints in the dust, bits of food, candle wax, a crumpled pack of cigarettes with Vietnamese writing on the label, still faintly tobacco-scented. This isn't a museum of war. It's an active system. You are not alone down here, even if you can't see or hear anyone. The silence just means they're better at hiding than you are. And they know you're coming. They always do. These tunnels were built with defense in mind. Choke points, ambush zones, sniper holes angled perfectly at belly height. Some passages have tiny platforms just above eye level where someone can crouch silently and wait for a flashlight to pass underneath. You crawl by thinking you're alone, and someone is counting your breaths. You can't fight in here. Not well. Not on their terms. But that's the point. These tunnels were never about giving you a fair chance. They were about turning your own confidence into a liability. So yes, this is your new office. No windows, no ventilation, no backup. Just winding paths dug by ghosts, held together by sweat and strategy, and watched by people who know these walls better than you ever will. You're not crawling through history, you're crawling through someone else's home, one they're willing to die for. You don't belong here, but that doesn't matter anymore. You're already inside. The first thing you lose is time. It stops meaning anything down here. There's no sun, no shadow, no change in light. Your body, confused by the absence of sky, gives up trying to track it. You start to guess, by the sweat soaking into your sleeves, by the cramps in your thighs, by the growing sting behind your eyes. But you're always wrong. 5 minutes feels like an hour. 10 minutes feels like you've been buried alive since childhood. Eventually, you stop guessing. You just crawl. The second thing to go is depth perception. Your flashlight throws shadows against the walls, but they move in strange ways. It's never quite clear how far away the next bend is, or if it's even a bend at all. Sometimes it looks like the tunnel is narrowing when it isn't. Sometimes you reach for a wall that turns out to be inches farther than expected, or bump your head against a ceiling you thought was higher. Light behaves badly down here. It gets swallowed. It turns corners that shouldn't exist. The space warps until you forget how big you are, or how small the world is. The longer you're down here, the less you trust your own eyes. At some point, your breathing starts to sound wrong. Too loud, Too fast, too close to your ears. It echoes in ways that make your chest tighten. You hear yourself panting and think it's someone else. You pause to listen and realise you can't tell whether that thudding noise is your heart or your boots brushing against packed earth. And then you wonder if you even moved at all. You start to question whether you've been crawling in circles, whether you missed a turn, whether the tunnel looped or collapsed or quietly sealed, shut behind you. You think of the rope, the one that's supposed to be tied around your ankle, but now you can't remember if anyone actually attached it. You can't remember the last time you saw another human face. The walls don't touch you at first, then they do. Slowly, subtly, like a dream getting too close. The tunnel narrows in a way that's hard to notice at first. You hunch a little more. You turn your head to the side. You drag your chest across the dirt and feel it press back. Clay against ribs, soil against spine. You keep moving because you have to. You can't go backward. You can't turn around. You're inside something now. Not just a tunnel, but something living. Something thinking. And it's thinking about you. You try to breathe through it. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Like they taught you. You count your breaths. You grip the flashlight tighter, even though your hand is already cramping. The beam flickers. You curse under your breath, then immediately freeze, wondering if the sound carried farther than you meant. You listen. Nothing. And that's worse. You want noise. Noise means life. Noise means you're still in the world. But this tunnel doesn't give you noise, just pressure and heat and silence that pulses against your temples like a second heartbeat. Claustrophobia isn't a switch. It doesn't flip on. It rises, slow and inevitable, like a tide you didn't notice until it's past your knees. It starts in your fingers, twitching, tapping, desperate to do something, anything. Then your toes start curling in your boots. Then your shoulders tremble with every exhale. Your body is begging to stand, to stretch, to flee. But you can't. There's no room. There's no direction to run. You're inside the earth, and the earth doesn't care that your brain is splintering. Then come the tricks. A whisper you swear came from behind. A shadow that moves too fast across the beam. The sensation that someone, or something, just touched the back of your ankle. You stop again. You shine your light. Nothing. You tell yourself it's just a draft, a bug, a vine. You keep going. And then the sound comes again. Faint, soft, like breath on the nape of your neck. You spin your head too fast and jam it against the wall. Pain blooms across your skull, but you're grateful. Pain means you're still real. Some guys say they see people. Not enemy fighters, not ghosts exactly. Just flickers of faces. Children crouched in alcoves. Women with their mouths sewn shut. A man grinning with no eyes. You tell yourself you won't see any of that. You're rational. You're grounded. But when you blink and think you see a handprint that vanishes a second later, you don't say anything. You just keep crawling and pretend your brain isn't unraveling in small deliberate knots. Eventually, you reach a wall, or a bend, or a drop. It's hard to tell. You press your face into the clay and try to decide whether to go forward, up, down, or back. You think about shouting for help, but that would admit you need it. You think about resting, but you know you won't start moving again if you do. So you keep crawling, because that's all there is. Forward, 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 until your sense of self is scraped raw and all you can think about is light, air, sky. Claustrophobia isn't optional, not here. The tunnel finds your limits and then quietly moves past them. You don't beat it, you endure it, if you're lucky. If you're not, you stop somewhere in the dark and never start again. Maybe the others pull you out, maybe they don't. Maybe the tunnel just absorbs you slowly, the way it was always meant to. By the time your nerves are frayed and your flashlight's beam feels more imaginary than helpful, the real threat begins. The part no one ever romanticized. Because this place wasn't just meant to disorient you, it was designed to kill you. If the tunnel itself doesn't get you, if the air doesn't run out, if the walls don't collapse, if your own brain doesn't crack under the pressure, then the traps probably will. Because the tunnels weren't just passageways, they were weapon systems, and every inch of them was designed to kill, maim, confuse, or trap you without warning and without mercy. The Viet Cong didn't have the luxury of industrial warfare. What they had was time, dirt, scrap metal, and an intimate understanding of how the human body fails. So they used it. Every trap was cheap to make, easy to reset, and impossible to forget once it did its job. These weren't elaborate Hollywood-style booby traps with wires and blinking lights. These were simple, efficient, and horrifying in their practicality. Start with the Punji pit, a classic. You crawl forward and your weight shifts just a little too far onto what looks like solid ground. Suddenly it gives way, and you fall, not far, just enough, into a shallow pit lined with sharpened bamboo spikes. Sometimes they're dry, sometimes they're coated in feces or rotting meat to guarantee infection if the fall doesn't kill you. The spikes aren't always straight up and down, either. Some are angled backward so they go in easily, but tear you apart when someone tries to pull you out. Then there's the toe popper, a foot-level trap designed to explode when triggered by minimal pressure. They're not meant to kill outright. They're designed to maim. One misplaced step and you lose half a foot, or your kneecap, or your groin, depending on your position when you trigger it. The result is always the same. You stop moving, and now the tunnel is blocked by your body. That means no reinforcements, no retreat, no clean escape. Tripwire grenades are another favourite. Thin wire strung across a tunnel corner, often placed where your hand naturally goes when you're crawling in the dark. Brush it, even slightly, and a grenade hidden in a wall cavity detonates at face level. In confined space, the blast doesn't have to be big. It only needs to be close. One detonation in a tunnel chamber can rupture eardrums, blind you, or tear open your abdomen with shrapnel from wood, rock, or even your own gear. You won't have room to duck, and you won't get a warning. Some traps are psychological. Decoy tunnels that look promising but collapse halfway through, trapping you in a dirt coffin. False walls that lure you into ambush points. Hidden pits lined not with spikes, but with sharpened sticks dipped in irritants. Not fatal, but painful enough to make you scream and give away your position. Some had dead-end chambers where smoke or gas could be funneled in from above, turning your crawl space into a slow, suffocating execution chamber. Spring-loaded traps were rare, but effective. A tripwire releases a swinging plank armed with metal fragments, nails, or sharpened stakes, timed to hit you across the face or chest. In a space barely wide enough to crawl through, there's no dodging it, no bracing, just impact. It's not just about killing you, it's about destabilizing you, ruining your aim, making you drop your light, making you bleed enough that someone else hears you. There were also pressure traps, small plates buried under a thin layer of dirt. Crawl over them, and they trigger either a spike from the ground or a small explosive mounted above. These weren't always lethal, but they were loud. The point wasn't always to kill. Sometimes it was just to alert the enemy that you were there. One bang, and the entire system around you wakes up. The tunnel that was silent 5 seconds ago is now alive. And you're the only target in reach. The worst part, most of these traps don't look like anything at all. They're built into the walls, the floor, the structure itself. The wood blends with the dirt. The wires are too fine to see in dim light. You can wave your flashlight over a wall and miss the trigger by inches. They're not dramatic. They're quiet, efficient. The traps don't want attention. They want results. And they're patient. Once set, a trap can sit untouched for weeks, even months. The tunnel builders knew how to preserve them, how to waterproof the fuses, how to conceal the signs. You could be the 10th guy to crawl through a section and still be the one who triggers it, because the trap wasn't made for most people. It was made for you, for the unlucky, for the one guy who steps wrong. You were trained to shoot, to take cover, to move as a unit. None of that helps you here. These traps aren't part of a battlefield. They are the battlefield. There's no safe approach, no standard procedure. You crawl, you guess, and you hope. That's the job now. One slow motion through an unfamiliar tunnel, trusting that the floor won't collapse or the wall won't detonate or the air itself won't catch fire. The tunnel doesn't need to beat you in combat. It just needs you to make one mistake, and it's got 100 different ways to punish that mistake. Quietly, efficiently, and without ever giving you a second chance. So if you thought the enemy was your biggest problem down here, you haven't met the locals. The Kyu Chai tunnels weren't just a human death maze. They were a thriving microcosm of things that bite, sting, crawl, burrow, and occasionally hiss in your direction without explanation. Nature doesn't care about your orders. It doesn't care about borders or uniforms or chain of command. It just wants to eat, nest, and maybe lay eggs in your hair if you hold still long enough. And the tunnels provided perfect real estate. Start with the rats, not the cute cartoon kind with chef hats. These are trench rats, oversized, underfed, and thoroughly unbothered by your presence. They live in the walls, the floors, the discarded supplies. You'll hear them before you see them. Little claws scratching at the dirt inches from your head. Sometimes they bolt across your back as you crawl, treating you like a speed bump. Other times they sit still, watching, daring you to make eye contact while you aim your flashlight, and try not to scream like a child. They're not scared of you. They've seen worse. Then there are the centipedes. The Vietnamese jungle is home to Scolopendra subspinipes, a creature that looks like it was designed by someone with a personal vendetta against comfort. Bright red and black, a foot long, and venomous enough to make your vision blur. Their bites don't usually kill you, but they do feel like someone set fire to your nerves, and then politely reminded you that morphine is in short supply. They like dark places, damp ones, like tunnels, like your boots. There are stories, not joke stories, about soldiers getting bitten while pulling on socks, while unzipping tents, while crawling through shafts no wider than a coffin. One guy was bitten on the wrist while trying to brush one off his chest. He didn't finish that mission. Spiders, naturally, are everywhere, mostly harmless but big. Legs like twigs, eyes that shine red in flashlight beams, and webs that you walk through with your face before you ever see them. And once you've felt a web across your mouth, in a pitch-black tunnel, you'll never trust open air again. Some of them are fast, some are slow, all of them are unwelcome, and they don't file for eviction. Ants are less dramatic, but arguably worse. Vietnam is home to multiple species of aggressive, biting ants, including army ants that travel in vast, organised lines. If you crawl over one of their nests, or worse into one, you'll know immediately. The bites are sharp, fast, and coordinated. You'll feel them under your shirt, in your ears, crawling up your sleeves. The only effective countermeasure is to strip down, scream, and hope you weren't already halfway into a tunnel when they found you. And then there are the snakes. You probably expected them, but not like this. These aren't lazy pythons or slow-moving garden snakes. You're looking at kraits, cobras, and the infamous two-step snake. So named because that's how many steps you're rumoured to take after it bites you before you collapse. Whether or not that nickname is accurate doesn't matter. What matters is that some of these snakes are nocturnal, territorial, and just small enough to coil up unseen in the tunnels until your hand brushes against them. And in tight spaces with no room to dodge, a snake strike is a guaranteed hit. Your only defence is not being the unlucky one, crawling through that section today, or at least being faster than the guy behind you. Bats show up occasionally, and while they won't kill you, they will absolutely ruin your last shred of composure. You'll be crawling, breathing heavy, sweating through your eyes, and then something leathery flaps past your face with a screech that sounds like it came from the pits of hell. You swat blindly, hit your head on the ceiling, drop your flashlight, and spend the next 20 seconds praying you didn't just knock it into a pit trap. The bat is long gone. You're still shaking. Fungus is the final insult. You don't really think of fungus as an enemy until you've spent days underground with nothing but damp air and rotting fabric. It grows on your boots, your canteen, your belt. You start to itch in places that were never supposed to itch. Respiratory infections become standard. Your sweat starts to smell wrong, sour, metallic. You get sores that don't heal and skin that peels in patches. One guy got trench foot so bad the corpsman said his toes looked pre-digested. That was the nice version. And through it all, the smell never changes. A thick, sour blend of ammonia, rot, mildew, and decay. The tunnels never dry out, so everything down here, including the animals, is slowly decomposing. You breathe it in. You wear it. It becomes a second skin, clinging to your nose long after you've crawled back out. Sometimes you smell it days later, up on the surface, and your body tenses before your brain catches up. You signed up for war. You trained for bullets and bombs. You didn't train for centipedes that bite through gloves or snakes coiled next to booby traps. But the tunnel doesn't care what you expected. It offers everything: engineering, horror, and biology, all working together to make sure that even if a human enemy doesn't get you, something else will. Something smaller, slimier, hungrier. The truth is, you're not just outgunned down here. You're outclassed. You don't belong in the tunnels, and everyone knows it. Least of all the people who built them. The Viet Cong weren't improvising. They weren't guessing. They had a system, and you're crawling through it like a lost tourist who took a wrong turn into a locked basement. You might have the better gear. You might have the training. But none of that matters in a war where the enemy knows every inch of the terrain, and you're still trying to figure out which way is forward. They built this world, not as an afterthought, but as a long-term strategy. Every curve, every blind corner, every narrow shaft, it wasn't just about hiding. It was about controlling the fight. You enter on their terms. You move where they let you. You see what they want you to see. And when it's time to strike, they're already in place. Waiting. Silent. Patient in a way you can't comprehend until you've spent a few hours underground and realised you're the loudest thing in the dark. They didn't fight like you. They didn't line up and shout orders and storm the front. They listened. They learned. They didn't waste movement or breath. A good tunnel fighter didn't need to speak. They used taps on the wall, code knocks, soft shifts in pressure to communicate. You wouldn't even hear them until it was too late. While you were crawling with a flashlight and a pistol, they were crouched motionless in a shadowed alcove, unmoving for hours, conserving energy, conserving oxygen, waiting for you to make the first mistake. You brought steel. They brought silence. You brought noise. They brought memory. Every branch of that tunnel system was familiar to them. Not studied, not mapped, but lived in. They slept there, ate there, healed there. Some were born there. They could tell from the air alone whether a section had been disturbed. A footprint in the dust wasn't just a clue. It was a message. They didn't just navigate with their eyes. They used the feel of the dirt, the draft of the air, the scent of sweat that didn't belong to anyone they knew. They didn't panic. They didn't rush. If a tunnel was compromised, they didn't always fight to the death. Sometimes they simply vanished. Gone deeper, shifted routes, collapsed a section behind them. They didn't need to win every confrontation. They only needed you to fail. And with enough time, you would. They'd wait for you to get tired, to cough, to drop something, to twitch your light the wrong way. They only needed a second. You needed a miracle. They had methods for everything. There were quick exits, escape routes, collapsible sections, hidden turns and concealed shafts that led to distant rice paddies, to villages, to nowhere at all. If you chased them, you'd be chasing a shadow. One turn too late and they'd be behind you, not in front. You couldn't think your way out. You couldn't shoot your way out. You just got smaller, slower, more afraid. They stayed calm, because this wasn't strange to them. This was home. Some of them trained for this for years. Teenage fighters who grew up digging tunnels, who learned from uncles, brothers, fathers. They were taught how to move without sound, how to fire one shot and disappear, how to make you waste your energy crawling while they waited in stillness. Discipline wasn't optional. If you sneezed, someone else died. If you breathed too loud, a position was lost. You weren't just fighting people, you were fighting an entire mindset. They could fight with anything. Rifles, pistols, knives, sticks sharpened into spears. They didn't need perfect weapons. They didn't even need to win a fight cleanly. A scratch, a bite, a fragment, anything that slowed you down meant they had time to regroup, reset, or lure you deeper. They didn't need to kill you in one go. They just needed you to realize you couldn't win. And once that crept into your head, they'd already won. You weren't their first visitor. You weren't their last. They'd seen men like you before. Bigger, stronger, better fed, better armed. And they buried most of them. Not in graves, but in unmarked dirt beneath the jungle floor. They didn't brag about it. They didn't leave notes. Just silence. Just tunnels. Just the grim, practical knowledge that if you fight someone on their terms long enough, it doesn't matter how many medals your side prints. And when you finally crawl out, limbs shaking, shirt soaked, eyes wide and blinking in the sunlight, like you've just escaped hell, you might feel like you survived something impossible. But they don't see it that way. You were just the latest intrusion. A brief tremor in the dust, something to adapt to, something to wait out. You were fighting a people who knew how to vanish, how to build cities beneath the dirt, how to fight without being seen, and who understood, better than anyone, that in war, patience isn't just a virtue, it's a weapon. One you never learned how to use. You brought a gun. Good for you. So did everyone else. But down here, it might as well be a rock with a handle. The tunnels weren't designed for firefights. They were designed to make firearms nearly useless. You'll learn that the first time you try to raise your pistol and find you don't have enough room to lift your elbow, every movement is a compromise. You can't aim properly. You can't brace. You can't see more than 6 feet ahead of you. And even if you could, the second you fire, everything changes. You squeeze the trigger, and the sound is immediate and unforgiving. The blast hits the dirt walls and bounces back in a compressed thunderclap. It doesn't echo, it ricochets. A gunshot in a tunnel, like setting off a firework inside a coffin. The pressure hits your eardrums like a hammer. You feel it in your teeth. You lose half your hearing for the next 10 minutes, assuming you had any left. That first shot might save your life. It might also make you deaf, disoriented, and blind from the muzzle flash. A fair trade, if you like rolling the dice. Firing a handgun in a tunnel isn't about aiming. It's about proximity and luck. You shoot at shapes, outlines, flashes of movement. You're not lining up iron sights. You're jerking the barrel toward anything that looks vaguely threatening and hoping the bullet doesn't bounce off a wall and come back at you. Recoil is exaggerated in tight spaces too. You don't have room to absorb it, so the gun kicks awkwardly, pulling your wrist sideways. Good luck getting off a second shot in the right direction. Your .45 was designed for stopping power. Above ground, that's helpful. Down here, it's a liability. The round goes through a body and into a wall, or through a wall and back into your leg, if you're lucky enough to be crawling in an adjacent tunnel. Muzzle flashlights, up everything for a moment, including you. Your face, your position, your expression, all briefly visible to anyone watching. For that split second, you are a target painted in orange light. Reloading is another issue. If you're on your belly, and you usually are, reaching for a spare mag is like trying to itch your lower back through a flak vest. You fumble, you twist, you unclip the wrong pouch, you drop the magazine, you curse quietly and hope no one hears it. Even if you do reload, there's no guarantee your next shot won't jam. Dirt and humidity do terrible things to moving parts. That gun that worked fine at the range, it's been through mud, sweat, and 3 days of bad maintenance. You're lucky it fires once, let alone twice. If you can't shoot, you might try to fight. Not a good idea. Hand to hand in a tunnel isn't like the movies. It's not choreographed, it's not clean. You don't get to square up or block punches. You grab whatever part of the enemy is closest, an arm, a collar, a patch of hair, and pull. You knee blindly. You choke with one arm while bracing yourself with the other. Elbows are useless. Kicks are impossible. You're both gasping, scrabbling in the dark, trying to pin each other without room to move. Knives are common, but they don't guarantee survival. Using a knife in a tunnel means stabbing fast and often. You don't go for technique, you go for repetition. Armpit, neck, belly, anything soft, anything that bleeds. And you'd better be fast, because if they get their blade in first, you won't even feel it until later. You'll just be crawling, and then suddenly the tunnel feels wet and your arm stops working. If you're lucky, it's just muscle. If you're not, it's the last thing you ever feel. Fighting face to face at this distance means you smell everything. Breath, blood, dirt, fear. It's close, primal, animal. You're not thinking in strategy or tactics. You're thinking in muscle and instinct. One of you lives, one of you doesn't. And it usually comes down to who panics slower. If you're injured in a tunnel, you don't scream. You bite down and crawl. There's no stretcher, no medic. If you can't move, you become an obstacle. Your body blocks the path for anyone behind you. You slow everything down. So you either get out under your own power, or someone drags you by the boots, if they have the luxury of time. More often, you get left behind. Not out of cruelty, out of necessity. No one wants to die trying to rescue a guy who already can't shoot back. And even if you win, if you kill the guy hiding in the bend or survive the ambush or shoot first in the dark, you're still alone, underground, bleeding, deaf, and rattled to the bone. There's no cheering, no air support, no bandage waiting back at base, just more tunnel ahead, and the knowledge that someone else might be waiting in the next bend, crouched in the dark, weapon raised, doing everything better than you just did. At first you think you're still heading the right way. That's the trick. The tunnel slopes gently, the walls curve just slightly, and everything starts to feel familiar in a way that should be comforting, but isn't. You crawl forward trusting your instincts, because that's all you've got. There's no map, no chalk markings, no glowing exit signs or arrows to follow. Just packed earth and stale air pressing in from every direction. You don't even remember how many turns you've taken. You're hoping the next one leads to something. A chamber, a ladder, daylight. But what it leads to is more tunnel. Just more. You pause to think, to orient yourself. You try to replay the last 10 minutes in your head, but your memory's already warped. Did you take 2 lefts or 3? Was that a slope down, or just a trick of your flashlight? You shine the beam behind you, but the tunnel looks identical in both directions. Curved, claustrophobic, quiet. You think maybe you'll just backtrack, except you're not actually sure which direction is back anymore. The air feels stiller now. Not heavier exactly, just wrong. It's the air of an unused room, sealed too long. You lick your lips and realise your mouth's gone dry. That's new. You hadn't noticed it changing. You hadn't noticed anything changing, really, which is how this place works. It shifts beneath your awareness, slowly, gently, until you realise you've been crawling for 20 minutes in a direction that no longer feels like anything. You glance at the walls, looking for something, anything, a scrape mark, a boot print, a notch in the clay. But these walls don't hold on to memory. They're too smooth, too uniform. Every inch is the same texture, the same dull colour. If you had chalk, maybe you could mark your way, but you don't. You never thought you'd need it. Now it seems absurd that you didn't bring it, like forgetting to tie your shoes before walking into a storm. The worst part isn't the fear, not yet. It's the growing suspicion that no one up top is expecting you back anytime soon, that they assumed this would take a while, that they don't even know you're missing yet. There's no radio contact, no rope tied to your ankle this time. It was supposed to be a quick sweep, in and out, and now every turn looks like the last and every breath sounds too loud. You reach a split, a Y branch in the tunnel. Both paths curve away, out of sight. You crouch there for a moment, unsure. Flip a mental coin. You pick one, crawl 20 feet, then stop. Something's wrong. You back out, try the other one. That one's wrong too. It feels different, but not better. You consider just picking one and pushing through, but that's how you get deeper. That's how you disappear. The tunnel ceiling drops a little, just enough that you have to duck your head more than usual. Your neck starts to cramp. Your knees are already shot. You adjust your position, gritting your teeth. The dirt here smells mustier than before. The light in your flashlight pulses. Not out, not yet, but dimmer. Maybe the battery's running low, or maybe it's your nerves again, seeing things that aren't there. Either way, your world gets a little smaller. You tell yourself to stay calm. You've trained for worse, technically, but the silence is absolute now, and your thoughts are no longer lining up properly. You start running calculations, how far you've crawled, how much energy you've used, how much oxygen might be left if this part of the tunnel is sealed. You realise you don't know the answer to any of those questions, and no one else does either. You find yourself turning around more often, doubting, doubling back. You catch your own boot print and feel a wave of relief, followed by confusion, then dread. Is it your boot print from earlier? Or from now? Are you looping, crawling in circles? You didn't think that was possible. But here you are, crawling past the same knot of roots, the same uneven patch of clay, again and again. Eventually, you stop moving. Not for rest, not for thought. Just to not move. You click off your flashlight for a second. The dark wraps around you like a second skin. You can't hear anything but your own breath and the small creaks of your gear. You click it back on. Nothing's changed. That was your test. The one where you hope the dark will shake you out of this, show you something you missed. But it doesn't. It never does. You're not in danger exactly. Not yet. You're just lost. And in a place like this, that's enough. The tunnel isn't hunting you. It doesn't need to. It just waits. You're the one who moves, who guesses, who gets tired, who starts making choices that aren't really choices. Left or right, forward or backward. Eventually all paths start to feel the same, and none of them feel like escape. You keep crawling. Because what else is there to do? The tunnel lets you leave eventually. That's the cruel part. It doesn't kill you right away. It spits you back out into daylight, blinking and dazed, covered in sweat and mud, and questions you don't know how to ask. You survived, technically. You're breathing, you're standing, you're even walking, sort of. And everyone around you nods like that's enough. Mission accomplished. You made it out. But something stays behind. Not a part you can point to. Nothing a corpseman can stitch up. Just something internal. Something weightless but permanent. It's in your shoulders, in the way they start hunching forward, even when you're standing upright. It's in your eyes, which flinch at sudden movement now, even in places where nothing dangerous has ever happened. It's in the way your ears start ringing at random, echoing noises that aren't there. Dirt crumbling, muffled breathing, the dry click of something that never went off. The first few nights, you barely sleep. Not because you're too wired. You're beyond wired. Your body's exhausted, but your brain won't power down. Every time you start to drift off, you feel like you're still crawling. Your legs twitch, your arms cramp, your lungs tighten as if the air's gone stale again. You start dreaming in silence. Not chaos, not explosions, just silence. Long, oppressive, motionless silence. Sometimes there's a flicker of movement in the dark. Sometimes you dream of turning around and realizing there isn't a way back. You become jumpy, not in the Hollywood sense, not flinching at fireworks or ducking under tables. It's subtler than that. A bottle rolling off a table makes you freeze for half a second longer than you should. Someone speaking behind you makes your neck muscles seize. You walk slower now. You double-check doors. You memorize the layout of every room you enter, just in case. You don't mean to. You just do. Some of the guys talk about it. Quietly. Usually after dark, when the heat breaks and the jungle quiets down. You hear words like weird dreams or something off or I'm not right anymore. It's never a breakdown. No one sobs, no one collapses. You all just sit there, smoking, drinking bad coffee, waiting for a sense of normal that never really shows up. And when the next mission comes, you nod and go. Because saying no isn't really an option, and admitting you're scared feels worse than crawling back in. It builds, mission after mission. Not louder, heavier. You stop reacting, stop feeling much at all. You see another trap, another dead end, another silent chamber with signs of life, and no people, and you don't even blink. You used to feel relief when you made it out. Now you just feel less anxious, less alert, less human. You crawl because that's the job. You eat because you have to. You speak when spoken to. You drift through the surface world like a visitor, like someone who was supposed to stay underground and got spit out by mistake. The real damage doesn't show up on X-rays. It doesn't bleed or bruise. It accumulates like humidity. Constant, subtle, inescapable. You start forgetting things. Where you put your gear, whether you've already eaten, what day it is. You get headaches for no reason. You lose your appetite. You lash out at people who tap your shoulder too suddenly. You start avoiding tight spaces, even above ground. You pick seats near exits. You sleep with your back to a wall. You stop trusting quiet. When you do go home, if you go home, it doesn't go away. The tunnels follow you invisibly. You'll be sitting at a dinner table and the air will suddenly feel too heavy. You'll step into an elevator and forget how to breathe. You'll crouch to pick something up and catch a smell, mildew, sweat, oil, and your stomach will drop. 1 second, you're in a grocery store. The next, you're back underground, crawling toward a sound you can't explain. People don't know what to ask, so they ask the wrong things. Did you ever see combat? Did you ever kill anyone? You say no because it's easier, because it's cleaner, because what are you supposed to say? That you crawled through hell in a space too small to lift your head? That you stopped feeling alive somewhere around your 4th mission? That every time you close your eyes you see roots hanging from a ceiling you can't reach? There's no medal for that. No therapy sessions when you get back. No pamphlet on how to reintegrate with a world that doesn't smell like clay and sweat. You just carry it. Quietly. Patiently. Like the tunnel taught you. Because once you've spent enough time down there, part of you stays. Buried maybe, forgotten by others, but not gone. You survived, that's what they'll say. But survival isn't always the clean ending it sounds like. Sometimes it's just what's left when the damage is done. You come back to the surface like a man returning from a different century. You blink in the light, you breathe the air, you stand upright for the first time in hours. And none of it feels right. The sun is too bright, the colours are too sharp. The sound of people talking, laughing even, grates against something inside you. You should feel relieved, grateful, alive. But mostly, you feel wrong. Like a guest in your own body, walking through a place that only looks familiar. No one quite knows what to say to you when you crawl out of the dirt. They hand you a canteen, offer a cigarette, slap your back like you just finished a good day's work. You nod, because that's what's expected, but you don't say much. You sit down in the shade and drink water that tastes like metal, and you listen to the conversations going on around you, about rations, card games, rumours from the rear. None of it sticks. None of it feels real. You try to join in once or twice, tell a story, make a joke. But the timing's off. The words come out flat. You start talking about something you saw down there. Something strange. Something that's been gnawing at the back of your mind. And halfway through, you realise no one's really listening, not because they don't care, just because they can't follow. The silence in those tunnels doesn't translate. The air doesn't feel the same to them. They're glad you made it out, sure, but they'd rather not hear what it was like. You're not part of the platoon in the same way anymore. You sleep in the same tent, wear the same uniform, eat the same food, but you're separate. Not because you've changed, necessarily, but because they've seen what you do. They've watched you disappear into a hole in the ground without flinching, and they don't know how to look at you after that. Some treat you with respect, others avoid eye contact. A few make jokes because that's easier than admitting they'd fall apart in your position. You stop talking about the tunnels. It's simpler that way. You nod when people ask how it went. You say quiet or nothing down there or just another hole. The truth is heavier, more complicated, but no one's asking for that. They want the version of the story that's easy to swallow, clean, contained. You give it to them. You practice it. You repeat it. Eventually, even you start to believe it. When letters arrive from home, you read them twice, then tuck them away. They're written in a different language, one made of birthdays, weather, and recipes. Your mother says she's praying for you. Your brother asks if you've seen any action. A girl you barely remember signs her letter with a heart and a hopeful question mark. You try to write back, but the words feel fake. What are you supposed to say? Dear Mum, today I crawled through a tunnel that smelled like rust and old breath. How's the tomato garden? Even among other veterans, you feel off. The guys who've been in firefights, who've lost friends to mortars or ambushes, they talk about adrenaline, about chaos, about the noise. You listen politely. Then they ask what it's like in the tunnels. You pause. You think about explaining. You think about trying to describe what it's like to crawl for hours in a space the size of a coffin, to feel the dirt breathing against your skin, to know that the next step might be your last, and that no one would even hear it happen. But you just shake your head and say, it's dark. Time above ground moves differently, faster, looser. You find yourself watching the horizon for no reason, listening for sounds that aren't there. You sleep lightly, if at all. You check the seams in your cot, the corners of your tent, the pattern of your boots in the dust. You don't trust open spaces, but you don't feel safe indoors either. You float somewhere between worlds, not quite present in either. You start to fade from the stories people tell, not on purpose. You're still there, in the background, still eating meals, still showing up for duty, but you're not in it anymore. You become part of the scenery, a quiet fixture, the guy who goes into tunnels and comes back looking a little less like himself each time. People stop asking what you saw. You stop expecting them to. The surface world keeps going. The war shifts. Orders change. The jungle burns in one place and regrows in another. But you stay the same. A shadow with dirt under your fingernails and a silence in your chest that never quite goes away. You laugh when others laugh. You nod at the right moments, but you're not really with them. Not fully. You came back, but it doesn't feel like a return. It feels like an interruption, a pause between descents. The tunnel didn't kill you, it just marked you, and now everyone else is pretending not to see it, while you pretend you don't feel it. Let's strip away the narrative and talk about the math. Tunnel rats didn't get formal recognition as a specialized combat unit, but their mortality rates suggest they probably should have. The casualty figures are difficult to quantify precisely. Records were spotty, missions were informal, and outcomes were often ambiguous, but we can still piece together a picture based on what's available. In general, the average American infantryman in Vietnam faced a roughly 1 in 10 chance of being wounded or killed over the course of a year. High, but survivable. For tunnel rats, the ratio was closer to 1 in 3. That's a 33% casualty rate for men operating underground, in darkness, without backup, inside structures rigged specifically to maim or kill them. 1 in 3. If 3 of you went in, odds were at least one wouldn't come back intact. Of course, the numbers varied. Certain areas, like the Kyu Chai tunnels near Saigon or the Iron Triangle region, were death traps. In those sectors, loss rates climbed even higher. In some cases, an individual rat wouldn't even make it to a second mission. And yet, replacements were easy to find. Not because people volunteered, but because there were always more men who fit the physical profile. Short, lean, under 5 feet 6 inches. That was all it took to qualify. You met the size requirement, you got the assignment. No specialised training, no formal equipment, just small stature and bad luck. The lifespan of a tunnel rat, statistically speaking, was shorter than almost any other frontline role. Not just because of enemy action, but because of the environment itself. The risks weren't only from bullets or blades. They included collapsing tunnels, heat exhaustion, suffocation, disease, and venomous wildlife. Each factor added to the probability of failure. You didn't just need skill, you needed a stacked deck of luck, and you needed to draw the right card every single time. Let's talk weapons. The standard issue was a .45 caliber M1911 pistol, effective in open space, but dangerously loud in tight quarters. Tunnel rats often modified or swapped it for smaller caliber revolvers, which were quieter and less prone to jamming. Some carried knives, others relied on hand signals or sheer intuition. But no matter the equipment, none of it guaranteed survival. If anything, it just slightly adjusted the odds, up or down depending on terrain, readiness, or whether your flashlight battery happened to die at the wrong moment. Now factor in the sheer number of traps. Estimates suggest that heavily used tunnel networks could contain hundreds of booby traps per square mile. Some were mechanical, others chemical. All were placed with intimate knowledge of the terrain and a clear understanding of how an American soldier moved and thought. There was no standard procedure to clear them. No bomb disposal units crawling in beside you. You just advanced and hoped. Statistically, you only had to be unlucky once. Compare that to other high-risk roles. Helicopter pilots faced constant threat from ground fire, but had the benefit of speed and altitude. Forward observers operated under fire, but were often accompanied by a team. Tunnel rats had no such buffers. They went in alone, armed with minimal gear, navigating blind through hostile terrain, designed by people who knew they were coming. It wasn't combat. It was statistical roulette, with one loaded chamber out of every 3. The army didn't track tunnel-specific survival rates the way it did for pilots or infantry platoons. There was no official list of tunnel rat KIAs, no centralised command structure. Many rats operated informally, assigned ad hoc based on body type and necessity. That meant when they disappeared, they often did so without ceremony. They were reported missing, presumed killed, or simply listed as part of a broader engagement. The bureaucracy didn't calculate your odds because it didn't consider your job distinct enough to matter. Of those who did survive multiple missions, long-term physical outcomes were poor. Hearing damage from repeated underground gunfire was almost guaranteed. Respiratory problems from mold exposure and close-quarters smoke inhalation were common. Injuries from falls, tunnel collapses, and infections were routine. Few walked away without at least one permanent health issue. Many didn't walk away at all. You could argue that the tunnel rat role was an experiment, a tactical improvisation in response to a problem no one expected. The enemy lived underground, so someone had to follow, and that someone, more often than not, was you, the smallest man in the platoon, armed with a pistol, a flashlight, and a number on a casualty report waiting to be filled. Statistically speaking, you weren't supposed to make it this far. You weren't supposed to finish the first mission, let alone several. The odds were never in your favour. They weren't even close to fair, but the math didn't care. The math never does. You did your job. You crawled through the tunnels. You found the enemy caches, the hideouts, the makeshift hospitals and the weapon stashes. You reported your findings, cleared what you could, marked the rest for demolition. You did everything you were supposed to do. But if you're waiting for a sense of impact, something measurable, something permanent, you'll be waiting a long time. Because here's the truth. None of it made a difference, not in the way you were told it would. Every tunnel you cleared was rebuilt, sometimes in the same place, sometimes a mile away, sometimes before the week was out. The enemy didn't rely on fixed positions. They relied on flexibility. You blew up one chamber, they dug two more. You sealed an entrance, they opened another. The tunnel system wasn't a static target, it was a living network. And every time you cut off one limb, the rest adapted and continued moving. Intelligence reports were collected, enemy documents recovered, ammunition destroyed. You were told this helped the war effort, but the broader campaign didn't shift. The same provinces were cleared and then recaptured. Entire regions changed hands multiple times, not because of military genius, but because neither side ever truly controlled the terrain, especially not underneath it. The war didn't reward thoroughness, it rewarded appearance. Kill counts, weapons caches seized, footage of tunnels being collapsed. These were metrics that looked good on paper. They gave commanders something to say at briefings, but they didn't shift the momentum. They didn't shorten the war. They didn't prevent the next ambush on the next road the next day. Even when your missions were successful, the war went on as if you hadn't been there at all. By the late stages of the conflict, everyone knew it. The tunnel systems were no longer a surprise. They were an accepted part of the landscape, acknowledged, targeted, and still impossible to eliminate. Some operations aimed to destroy them in bulk. B-52 bombing runs, napalm, bulldozers. Whole villages were flattened in the name of tunnel clearance. But the networks went deeper than the craters and longer than the coordinates. They weren't just military structures, they were survival systems, hospitals, kitchens, classrooms. You weren't just fighting soldiers underground, you were fighting infrastructure. Even when entire networks were destroyed, the strategic effect was limited. The Viet Cong didn't need to win set-piece battles. They only needed to persist. They fought in shadows, adapted in silence, and endured losses with a kind of grim patience no amount of firepower could fully erase. Their tunnels weren't monuments to strength. They were symptoms of a strategy designed to outlast you. And they did. The broader war reflected the same logic. Tactical victories piled up with no strategic results. Villages were pacified, then lost again. Enemy units were wiped out, only to reappear weeks later. Supply lines were cut, then rerouted. Every milestone achieved was a temporary condition. The jungle, the politics, the terrain, they all refused to stay conquered. You won ground during the day and lost it at night. You won engagements but never peace. If there was a lasting result from the tunnel campaigns, it wasn't victory. It was exhaustion. For every tunnel collapsed, there were new ones dug. For every rat sent in, there were fewer willing to go next time. The wear and tear wasn't just physical, it was structural. A slow bleed of morale, of resources, of any illusion that the war could be tidied up with enough grit and explosives. You held on, but you didn't progress. And holding on in a war like this was just another form of losing. Eventually, the rhetoric shifted. Victory became stability, then containment, then peace with honor. But on the ground, nothing really changed. The tunnels remained, a symbol of everything the war failed to understand. That this wasn't a war of numbers or territory or decisive blows. It was a war of will. And the people who lived in those tunnels had more of it than anyone expected. So if you're wondering whether the crawling, the bleeding, the noise, the silence, the night spent staring at the ceiling and smelling dirt that wasn't there, if you're wondering whether it stopped the war or even slowed it down, the answer is no. You did your part. You did it well. But the system you fought against was never built to be defeated by men like you. It was built to survive them. In the end, the war ended not with victory, but with withdrawal, with evacuation, with silence, and the tunnels outlasted it all. carved into the ground like scars that didn't close. You walked away, if you were lucky, but the tunnel stayed, waiting, growing, proving, in their own quiet way, that they were never really gone. History zooms out, but you don't get to. You're still here, a single breathing person left in the aftermath of a war that didn't care who survived it. You don't feel like a hero. You never did. You didn't charge into the tunnels to prove anything. You didn't volunteer to be remembered. You were just there, small enough to fit, unlucky enough to be chosen, stubborn enough to keep going. That's all. You did the job because someone had to, and because saying no wasn't an option anyone gave you. And now, years later, people talk like it was courage, like it meant something bigger. But that's not how it felt when you were down there. And it's not how it feels now. You weren't fearless. You were terrified. Not all the time, but often enough to know that bravery isn't the absence of fear. It's just the act of moving anyway, because freezing isn't allowed. You didn't have a battle cry. You had a dry throat and a shaking hand, and a tunnel that didn't care what kind of man you were. You crawled because crawling was the job. You endured because there wasn't an alternative. You survived because you got lucky or someone else didn't. People like tidy stories. They want arcs and lessons and closure. But war doesn't offer those things. Not really, especially not in the places you went. There was no final stand, no cinematic moment, just slow progress in the dark, breath by breath, inch by inch. You didn't conquer anything. You didn't win. You emerged with your skin intact and your thoughts scrambled. And somehow, that became enough to count as valour. Maybe that's why you don't tell the full story. Not because you're ashamed, not even because it hurts, just because you know what they want to hear. And it's not the truth. They want courage, triumph, something that justifies the scars. But all you can give them is dirt and silence, and the memory of rooms that smelled like mould and rust. So instead, you smile. You give them pieces, just enough to keep the questions from getting too close. And when they call you brave, you nod politely. You say thank you. You don't argue. What else can you say? That bravery has nothing to do with it? That being underground didn't make you stronger? It just made you different? That every time someone hands you that word, it feels a little heavier, a little more hollow? You've learned how to carry it, but it never sits comfortably. You think about the men who didn't come back, not just the ones who died, the ones who stayed quiet, who drifted, who came home with bodies intact and minds unmoored. And they weren't heroes either, but they were real. They were human, just like you. And if heroism means anything at all, it should include that. The effort it takes to keep going after the story ends. The weight of returning to a world that didn't wait for you. The quiet work of being alive when part of you is still buried. Sometimes you catch glimpses of who you were before, a photograph, a letter, a voice from another room. You look at that younger version of yourself, clean, eager, unaware, and you don't feel pity. You don't feel pride. You just feel distance. That boy had no idea what was coming. He thought war was about glory, about proving something. He didn't know it would be about mud and crawling and long nights staring at ceilings, listening for sounds that weren't there. But you're still here. Somehow, you made it out. You held on through the noise and the silence, and the confusion that came after. That doesn't make you exceptional. It just makes you real. And maybe that's worth something, even if it doesn't come with medals or monuments. There's no script for what happens next. No roadmap for living after the story ends. You stumble. You adapt. You build routines. Some days you forget for a while. Other days, it all comes rushing back. Not as memory, but as sensation. The feeling of tight air, of stillness, of movement behind you that isn't there. You breathe through it. You wait for it to pass. It always does. Eventually. You don't need to be a hero. You don't even need to be understood. All you need is the space to exist without pretending, without performance, without someone else's version of what your story should have been. And if nothing else, you've earned that. The right to be quiet, to be complex, to be unfinished. Because underneath the uniform, the scars, the silence, you're still a person. One who crawled through darkness, not for glory, not for story, but because someone told you to, and you did it. That may not fit into anyone's definition of hero, but it's human, and that's enough. And that's the end of tonight's long crawl through a war that didn't need heroes, just small unlucky men with flashlights, and too much silence in their bones. If you're still awake, thanks for drifting through this part of history with me. If you'd like early access to more slow descents into history's quieter horrors, or if you just want to support the show, you'll find the Patreon link in the description. Feel free to like, subscribe, and leave a comment about when you would have turned back, at the first punji trap, or the second rat. Sleep well.